Dear guests, welcome to the Nordic Council's 70th anniversary debate in Iceland. My name is Gunnar Dovri, and I will be your guide on this part of today's discussion. This year, the Nordic Council marks its anniversary by placing a spotlight on the future of Nordic cooperation. To spark conversation about what Nordic cooperation should emphasize in the coming 5, 10, 20 years and beyond, the Nordic Council invites Nordic citizens to 5 political debates throughout the summer. 4 debates have already taken place in the democracy festivals in Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and Norway. Each of the debates have centered around different issues in the that the Nordic citizens considered to be the most important for Nordic cooperation to address. According to a survey where 3,400 Nordic citizens voiced their opinions. Today, here in Reykjavik, the 5th and final debate takes place. The debate zooms in on Nordic cooperation around the climate and environment, which in the survey was rated as the 2nd most important topic for Nordic cooperation. However, the survey also showed that the younger participant considered the climate and environmental issues to be the #1 important subject for Nordic cooperation. That is where we will take off from today. The thoughts and issues raised during the anniversary debates, including this one, are gathered and presented to the Nordic Council Presidium. To start things off, I now welcome this session's keynote speaker, Bryndís Haraldsdóttir, MP and chair of the Icelandic delegation to the Nordic Council. Bryndís, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and I'm going to start my clock now, because as Gunnar Dovri said earlier, I've never listened to a speech that I would have liked to have it longer, so I'm trying to not be too long. First of all, let me thank you all for being here, and thank you for inviting me to this session here. I think the word Democracy Festivals says it all. During all the years, it has been great to come to these festivals, but I think it has never been as important as right now, when the democracy is really facing a real fight in the world. But our session here is on sustainability and Nordic action regarding environmental issues and the climate change. The importance of cooperation in the Nordic region in terms of climate change is huge. And I think the Nordic Council and the Nordic Council of Ministers have been focusing on that for quite a long time now. All over the Nordic region, we seek to live in harmony with nature and create sustainable society. But we must do more. Climate changes, pollution, and threats to biodiversity calls for attention and all our energy. The Nordic model also faces growing challenges as democracy, integration, and inclusion comes under pressure. We are determined to lead the way and find good solutions for the future. And I think in that sense, the young people is the key. We must listen to our young people, and we agree that the time has come to concrete climate actions. We need to make this as our highest priority, and by generating and sharing knowledge, we find new innovative Nordic solutions. Our vision is that the Nordic region will become the most sustainable and integrated region in the world by 2030. And I believe if I would have been having this speech 1 year ago, it would be quite different discussion. But I want to focus a little bit here on the green energy transition in Iceland, and then come maybe a little bit back further to what I mean by that. It's different times now. Here in Iceland, we have a very good story to tell regarding green energy. We have been using geothermal to heat our houses. We have 90% of Icelandic houses are now geothermally heated. Using geothermal energy, we also use it to produce electricity and have been doing that for quite a long time. In the middle of the last century, due to the efforts, we closed down the Icelandic gas station and started using hydropower to produce electricity. And one could just imagine now if we would not have done that, and if we had believed in that the gas was the future. I think Iceland would be in a different situation than it is today. Now 90% of the total energy use in Iceland is green energy, and 99 90.7% of energy production in Iceland is green. We are now looking into wind energy and see some future in that, as well as producing e-fuels. This is going to be a huge challenge and key elements in achieving our important goal regarding climate actions. But we have put down very ambitious climate goals. But unfortunately, just from the news today, we are not doing so good. And the reason for that is probably many, and we have to find solutions in that sense. Our ambitious goals are regarding that we are going to cut emission on about 55% by 2030. We are accelerating the green energy transition in every sector. We have net zero emission goals for 2040. So we have to finish our energy transition before that time. And we have set the goal that Iceland will be the first country to be independent from fossil fuels. We will have to find balance between our climate goals, nature conservation, and maintaining good quality standards of living. And in many ways, that is kind of luxury problem, if so to say, for Iceland. Because now we look at Europe where we have energy crisis. And climate goals and energy is just a part of the same picture. Everywhere you go, speaking about climate issue, we talk about energy. And now we see that Europe is not energy sufficient, and unfortunately, Europe has been trusting on energy coming from Russia, and we know where that has led us to. So in Nordic's perspective, I think it's very, very important that we share knowledge. The Nordic nations are not all the same. We have this incredible opportunities here in Iceland. Other Nordic nations have some opportunities, but not necessarily the same. But together we are stronger, and many of these solutions has to do with technology and innovation. And in my opinion, the Nordic focus should be on cooperation regarding knowledge and technology. And the Nordic nation can, in this sense, as in so many others, be a front runner when it comes to climate action, human rights, and what the Nordic nation stands for. So let me just end with this. We need to turn words into action and send a clear message to the rest of the world and achieve sustainable development for the future. But we have to find balance between our climate goals, nature conservation, and maintain good quality standards of living, because that is, in the sense, what the Nordic nation stands for. So I'm looking very much forward to the discussion and debates here later. Hope I will be able to answer some questions also and get a little bit further into this debate. Thank you.
Informative and brief, but comprehensive speech. We would now like to welcome Tinna and Hugi to join us here in Reykjavik, and Eva Dögg, who joins us virtually from Germany, I believe. Hi, Eva. Tinna Hallgrímsdóttir is the chair of the Icelandic Youth Environmentalist Association. Eva Dögg Davíðsdóttir represents the Nordic Youth Council, and Hugi Ólafsson is the director of Department of Policy Coordination and International Affairs at the Ministry of Environment, Energy and Climate. And Bryndís, you already know. I would now like to offer you 1 or 2 minutes to give a short introduction to yourselves, starting with you, Tinna.
Yeah, so my name is Tinna Hallgrímsdóttir. I am a climate and sustainability activist, and as you said, I am the chair of the Icelandic Youth Environmentalist Association, and I'm also now a member of the Icelandic Climate Council.
Thank you. Hugi.
Yes, my name is Hugi Ólafsson, and I work at the ministry, which has now a long name, Ministry for Environment, Energy and Climate. And I was sort of responsible for climate issues from 2004 to 2020. I now had a small department dealing with international affairs and others, but of course, including Nordic cooperation, but of course, climate issues are everywhere where nations talk.
Thank you. And Eva Dag.
Hi, it's a bit of a reverb on my side here, but okay, now it's fine. Yes, so I am Eva Dag Davíðsdóttir, and in the context of climate and sustainability, I sort of wear many hats. It's something that has occupied me as an academic, as a deputy parliamentarian, and most recently in the corporate sector. But here today I am representing, as mentioned, Ungdommens Nordiske Råd, where I sit in the presidium, and I sit in the sustainability committee there.
Precisely. Thank you so much. Now let's head over to the panel, and starting with you, Tinna, and to restart by wishing you and congratulating you on your birthday. Happy birthday, Tinna.
Yeah, thank you.
A round of applause. Thank you. So how do you feel that the Nordic region should tackle the climate crisis from the perspective of the Icelandic youth environmentalist movement? What are the most important actions to take now and in the coming years?
Well, I think just to start with the basis, we really need to stop all fossil fuel extraction. And that needs to be a common Nordic stance on that. We know we don't have everyone on board, and I think we all know which country I'm talking about. And we can't just tackle this from the demand side, it also needs to come from the supply side, and who is in a better position to take that step than a developed nation that already has high income and doesn't need to rely on this as their main source. So therefore, we should be able to really demonstrate that we are ready to look ahead and take this big important step and show some good precedents for other nations and other regions.
You mentioned defossilizing the economy. Now the Prime Minister voiced ideas of banning searching for oil in Iceland. Is that something that you celebrate?
Yes, of course, and that's a decision that was taken a while back, but I really celebrate that the Prime Minister is iterating that decision, and that's something that Iceland is at least ready to take a clear stance on.
Exactly. Now, Eva, you also represent a youth organization, the Nordic Youth Council. What is the role of the Nordic Council, and does it have a different emphasis than the Nordic Council itself when it comes to climate?
Yeah, so the Nordic Youth Council was founded about 50 years ago, so 20 years approximately after the Nordic Council. As I mentioned, we have a presidium that is representing the political spectrum, just like the Nordic Council. And we get the opportunity to sit on behalf of Nordic youth as observatory members in the committees of the Nordic Council. Of course, as we've seen in the Nordics, I think in general, when it comes to climate, youth has been taking a strong stance for action. So of course, we are trying to kind of push our resolutions forward. For example, now in this year that I've been a member, we put forward a resolution that was taken up by the committee that has to do with establishing or formalizing youth committees in all of the Nordic countries that have to do with climate. And that was passed now in the last session we had. So that's something that we have been working on throughout this year.
And as mentioned in the survey, the top priority for youth is the climate crisis. And assuming that the Youth Council echoes that view, do you feel that the Nordic Council and that the climate debate has perhaps taken a back seat to something more pressing in terms of time, like defense or something like that?
I mean, in the last few years, I would say that climate has actually taken a front seat rhetorically. But I think I can only echo what Tinna is saying, that in some ways, I mean, great policies and goals are one thing, but I think now we are in a time where we really have to give priority to these policies and sort of come to the process of defining what we mean, for example, with net zero targets or carbon neutrality. So I definitely think, and I see sitting in the Sustainability Committee, that there is a will, but like we see across the board when it comes to climate policy, there is simply an implementation gap. So I think we can do more there.
Precisely, and for the layman, it's sort of weird to hear that the targets of that the terms of net zero and climate neutrality aren't clearly defined. But that's something that we probably need to get started on defining. On that note, Hugi, while Norway and Iceland aim for a 55% reduction in emissions compared to 1990. Denmark intends to cut emissions by 70% by 2030, and Sweden aims for net zero by 2045. Do you have any idea why the Nordic countries have different climate targets, and would it make better sense to negotiate a common climate goal?
Well, I think the answer is very simple. We're different political entities, and so the climate policy is really decided in each country. But we do have, and then also, of course, collectively in the climate convention, and also we all have obligations at the European level, either through the membership of the EU or the European Economic Area. So it's quite complex. But I think it makes sense. It would even be undemocratic if we tried to have a common goal. But I think we do have a sensible approach. We do have a lot of cooperation, coordination, and the Nordic prime ministers have said that we do want a climate neutral Nordic region before the middle of the century, and that we want to lead by example. In some ways it may be perhaps a little bit healthy to have a little bit of competition of who can be the most virtuous and who can provide the most solutions. But we are learning a lot from each other, and we are financing projects which I think are good for us and for the rest of the world.
Precisely, and as you mentioned, it's a complex process. It's a lot of coordination and cooperation, which springs to mind the saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So if a common Nordic carbon emission is perhaps not practical, what should be the main focus, apart from, as you mentioned, setting an example? Is there anything beside that you visualize that we could do? In terms of science or in terms of technology? Or in any other field?
Well, I think we see a lot of good technologies and solutions emerging from Nordic regions, and we have also made reports on how we can export them and scale them up. And we know Iceland has geothermal. Denmark is a leader in wind energy. Norway is number one in electrifying transport. Road transport and sea. Finland, Sweden are good in biofuels, synthetic fuels, etc. But I think this leading by example is really key, because we have a lot of goals, we have a lot of targets, we have a lot of talk of ambition. But what we really lack is a model where we can decarbonize quickly and maintain a good standard of living. For the most part, people associate, and history tells us this is true, the more you emit, the better the living standard. That's how you get energy, that's how you fuel development. And we need to show that it is possible, and the Nordic countries, I think, are in a unique position to do so.
Precisely. Now, Bryndís, Nordic cooperation has the ambitious goal to make the Nordic region the most sustainable and integrated region in the world by 2030. We now have some 7 years to fulfill the goal of this goal. How well on the way are we? What needs to happen in the coming years if the Nordic countries are to turn this vision into a reality?
We are on our way, but we could probably run faster. But just from what I was saying earlier, I think it's also, we have a little bit different situation now than we had maybe 4 years ago. And because you talked here about Nordic, maybe the Nordic nations should have the same goals in that sense. That was discussed in our last session in Malmö this year. And we think it's better to do it this way, and the competition is better in that sense. But we also have to look at the sense that the Nordic nations are different, as you mentioned there. I mean, we have different ways of going there. And just want to mention also that, as Tinna said here, I know we are talking about Norway. Let's just say that, we don't have to hide that. But as I applaud our goals here in Iceland, I think it's very important, and my party is in government now, and we are saying we are not going to drill for oil here in Iceland. And I applaud that. I think it's very important because we have the opportunity to do that. Of course, Norway could also just stop. But where would we be buying our oil from? In that sense, I think it's better to buy it from a nation like Norway than from Russia or Saudi Arabia. So in all this picture, I think we have to look at the big picture in that sense. And as I said earlier, I think we should run for our goals, and we have to do better. We are not doing well enough. But you also mentioned it is difficult to understand that we are here in the year 2022 and we still not agree on what things really means and which action gives us. And that has been the problem in the political sense. When we are speaking about action, there are different views of what will we really gain from this action. So my point of view is that we have to do, it's not one thing, we have to do many, many things, and we might not always know exactly what it gives us, but we have to do it.
Exactly. It's to compare it to the United Nations Millennium Goals, the focus on to move them forward is not to do the best thing, but to do the next thing. So rather than spending all your time on figuring out exactly what the right thing is to do, it's better to do something that you know works. It's an interesting.
We know what is happening. Yeah. I mean, the science is telling us that they have been shouting on us for a very, very long time. We know many ways to work with it. We do not know exactly how to measure what we gain from each of it, so we have to do many things.
To take it back to you, Tinna, as you mentioned, the most recent addition to the Icelandic Climate Council, am I correct?
Yes.
So you've been there for weeks rather than months now, so you were not a part of, I assume, the process of them making the decision earlier this summer in criticizing the action plan put forward by the government. Do you feel that and that was for those of us who keep our ear to the ground in this, there was a change of tone for the council. It has a bigger meaning than most people might realize. Is that something that we might expect in the future? The council taking a more sort of active role on the stage?
Yes, definitely. Well, I've just had one meeting, freshman there, but definitely the council is going to be more active in taking a more clearer stance, because that is definitely what we need. Because if we don't get it from there, where will we get it? And we need a clear voice that the public, as well as other stakeholders in Iceland, actually have a faith in, and because there's a lot of information out there and people don't really know who to believe, or they are not in a position to adequately interpret the information that's coming out, because climate can be really complex also when you have all these targets, all these different years, and people don't know what to look at. So I think the Climate Council is very important as a voice to do that, and we aim on being really clear and precise and coming forward with more force than before. Precisely.
And will you be looking into these definitions, climate neutrality, net zero? Is that something that the council is responsible for defining, or have a say in defining?
Well, I can't speak exactly if that's, but I think defining what kind of carbon neutrality Iceland aims to go for is very important. That's something I've been working and advocating for just within the NGO. because now the only thing we know about Iceland's carbon neutrality is that it's going to happen in 2040. We don't have a clear definition, for example, how we're going to treat land use change and forestry regarding in those calculations, and then just what kind of a carbon neutral Iceland do we want. That is a big decision that we all need to make. It needs to be made in consultancy with the public so that we're all heading to the same spot. If we don't see a target, if we can't visualize it, you can't convince people to go along. So I think that's really crucial.
Exactly. Now, moving to both the youth organizations, Eva and Tinna, there's been a sort of an underlying theme of the youth's approach to climate as being based on sort of fear or anxiety or not being able to visualize a future even. So to sort of looking at the year 2030 and maybe not visualizing 2031. How do you feel that this is this something that goes on in, or for the first part, is this how it is, or really, and is this something that that is a pan-Nordic thing, or is this only in Iceland?
Well, when I've spoken to colleagues in the Nordic region, I feel like everyone is experiencing the same thing, maybe at a different degree, and they perhaps associate it with different things. Like we might associate it with our diminishing glaciers. That's something that we just envision as this rock in the Icelandic landscape, something that's always there. But I think everyone, even like myself, I'm so used to reading all these reports and stuff, but sometimes I just have to, like, I can't even, like, what this is in so few years, and like, I don't know what's going to happen really, and so much uncertainty. I think that's like, that's the main thing. It's so uncertain what's going to happen in the future, and that of course provokes anxiety.
Yeah. Eva, do you share that feeling?
Yeah, I mean, of course, living in uncertain times creates anxiety, and I think in general, obviously, youth and especially children and young people growing up today with these news bombarding them, of course, it affects them. And I think, in a way, what Tinna speaks about, this fatigue that people who are involved with, pushing policy or involved in activism, you get this sort of fatigue eventually when things seem to be at a standstill. And of course, at the same time, I think for a lot of people, it's hard to relate to these long-term goals. And I think what the will of a lot of youth organizations is to see kind of the clear pathway towards these goals. And I think that's something is also important to talk about. We can think about 2030, which is not that far away, or 2050, which is also within our lifetime. But, to get to carbon neutrality, obviously, there's a lot of stepping stones to those goals. So I think that's important in the context of youth involvement.
Yeah, it's good to keep in mind that 2040 is closer than 2000. Just if you hadn't realized. Now, to both Hugi and Bryndís, and you can arm wrestle if you don't want to answer it both. The Nordic countries all have a high, well, probably the highest living standard in the world, and are therefore probably, unfortunately, among the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide per capita. Will it be possible to maintain the Nordic welfare model while rapidly decarbonizing?
Well,
I think Bryndís.
Yes, I was just like, and politicians usually don't answer like yes or no, but I'm just going to say yes with this question. I think so. Yeah. And I think that is what the Nordic nation, they are so strong in so many, many ways. So we can keep our living standards and we can decarbonize, but we can maybe not see as much growth in our living standard as we have seen in last decade or so. But of course, how high are we going to go in these living standards?
Exactly.
So I mean, the living standards is really, really high, and we should not always look into just number of how to get more and better living standards, more money to spend in some things. So I think definitely we can keep our living standards, yes, and we can do that at the same time. But we just have to be focused. And it has a lot to do with money and what the government can do, but it's also just how we look at things. And it has to be on all our decisions. We have to have this like environmental issue glasses on in everything we do, everything we decide, what is the best for the environment. And if we do that, I am optimistic that yes, we can do.
Yes, I will answer the same. A definite yes, absolute yes, and don't take my word for it. It's economists have calculated this, and conventional economics says yes, we will have to accept a green premium. It will be more costly to have green solutions. We will see a little less growth in the richest countries in the world. But it's affordable with conventional economics. If you count the environmental costs, it is an investment in a better future. We'll have more energy security, cleaner air, and of course a livable planet in the long term. It is because we are really unleashing a catastrophe on a business as usual. So it is easily affordable with any calculations. There's a lot, of course, inertia, bottlenecks, which we should not, we don't have the technology fully in airplanes, in ships, etc. But we have the resources and very clearly. And if we can't do it, then it's very hard to see who should lead the way.
And in spite of setting world records in emission, the Nordic countries have been championed as having a welfare model that is the envy of the world, really, and is touched on. And as you mentioned, Bryndís and Hugi, the idea of infinite growth. This is something that Kate Raworth mentioned and talks a lot about in her book, Donut Economics, or Donut Economy, and touched on in the January convention of FESTA earlier this year. I know that you've been wrapping your head around sustainability for a while, Tinna. Any comments on that, the decoupling of emissions and growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just agree with what you said. If we can do it, then no one can. And I also think we just need to really take into account all emissions there. And I'm speaking also of consumption-based emissions, which we're also really good at, if you can say. So we need to really take responsibility for all the emissions that are caused by the Nordic nations, and then also try to decouple them from growth, and also just try to rethink also what is good development and what kind of societies we need. We can't, maybe the best pathway is not to just continue all the same things we're doing and change energy sources, change renewables. Maybe we also need to rethink a bit what kind of society we want to live in, how it is formed, and that also comes to what I was saying, like with carbon neutrality for Iceland, we need to know what kind of a future we are building.
Exactly. I think these will be our final remarks. The time is unfortunately up for the panel, but to send us off, I'd like to offer the floor to Ida Karolina Harris and Elise Frank-Steven, who have been active in the student climate crisis since 2019, when they first started in Iceland. Ida and Elise will give a few closing remarks, and this is kind of funny, coincidentally, it's also their birthday today, so if you wish them a happy birthday. So, and these climate fighters turned 17 today, if I'm not mistaken. Please, take the podium.
Hello.
Slight technical difficulties. Just tripping on the wires.
Hello, I am Ida.
And I am Elif. We are twins and are in the second year of Kvennaskólan and Tekniskólan. Today is the day of Icelandic nature and it's our 17th birthday.
Thank you for having us here today to listen to this meaningful discussion, and thank you for giving us this platform to share our opinions on the changes we want to see. We have been protesting now for well over 3 years, meaning we were only 13 when we started this journey.
From the very beginning, when we had little knowledge of the subject and only our longing for change to share, we were welcomed by the group and encouraged to express ourselves by more experienced and educated activists.
We were assured that we were not expected to know all the answers, but that our ideas and opinions were valued. It was clear that we could make a difference and let our voices be heard. We had the privilege to learn from the experts around us and to ask questions without judgment. Young people want action to be taken by governments to ensure a safe and sustainable future. Children who have not had this same opportunity as us or found this platform have not been able to express themselves in the same way. They have not found their voice and feel they are not sufficiently expert to venture an opinion.
Some kids are too scared to say anything. A lot of kids are really scared of their environmental, or scared of the environmental catastrophes they can expect to witness in their lifetimes, and scared to act on their fears in case they are not taken seriously. After all, we are just kids. We can't vote, and it feels like the government determined to ignore us and all of nature's warning signs. A lot of us feel helpless.
For us, attending the weekly Fridays for Future protests have helped manage our anxiety to a certain extent. At least we're doing something, and we are not giving up. At least we can come to a place and express our concerns. We can talk to others who share these concerns and discuss how we might make our voices be heard by those who have the power to make a difference.
Our emotions are mixed. We feel anger, frustration, despair, and fear. But we are trying to hang on to hope. What young people want regarding the climate crisis is no different to what we long for in any other aspect of our lives. We just want you to take care of us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elis, Ida, Tinna, Hugi, Bryndís, and Eva for our great discussion, and you, the audience here, and the audience at home. Thank you and have a good afternoon.